In this video, we're going to explore array.foreach in great detail. Array.foreach is without any doubt the most used array method out there. The only thing that can be compared to it is array map, which we're going to explore in the next video. If you understand how map and foreach work, you're going to have an easy time understanding all other array methods because they're all based on that iteration or looping through the array. The foreach method performs an action for each element in the array. Of course, for that we could use the standard for loop we learned about, but I will explain soon where and why to use the foreach. I'm going to type it in here, array for each. Great. So let's first create a demo array. Let's call it const names is equal to, let's do John, let's do Jenny, and Johnny, as we always do. Great. Okay, now, of course, what we could do is we could use that for loop we learned about. So for, let I is equal to 0, while I is lower than names.length, and then I++. While we are here, let's console log something, and we want to console log the index as well as the specific name. If we do this, let's see what the output will be. As you can see, we get 0 John, 1 Jenny, 2 Johnny. That's great. In this case, we have to declare and initialize another variable, that I thing here. And then the loop compares it every time with the array.length. If the expression evaluates to true, only then the loop executes. After the loop body is executed, the value of I is incremented by 1. We can eliminate this process using array.foreach method. That's the main part, to eliminate this process of creating that external variable and then incrementing it. So what is the syntax of the array for each? It works like this. As with any other array method, you first specify the name of the array and then you call the for each on it. For each method accepts a callback function. So I'm gonna write it right there, a callback function with opening braces. And then it accepts two parameters. First one is going to be the value, and then the second one is going to be the index, or we can just call it I for short. So to repeat, the first argument of the foreach method is the function that you want to execute for each element of the loop. This callback function has two most important arguments. The first argument is the value of the current element the loop is on. The second argument is the index of the current value. And then the third one is the whole array itself, but you don't need to use that often, so we're gonna skip that part here. We can perform the same action using foreach in this manner. We have the names here, and then what we have to do is call names.foreach. Now with parameters, we can name them however we want, so this is the case. Whenever you have an array here, we said array name is going to be plural. Names, people, users, anything ending with an S. So in this case, we're going to have a singular value of that names array. In this case, it's going to be called name. But again, this doesn't matter. This is just a parameter name. You can name it A as well. But the good practice is to use the singular name of this plural array name. And then in there, we're going to console log the name and the index, just like that. If we save it, you can see we get exactly the same thing, but in an easier way. You can see how simple this looks compared to that for loop that we had. No external variables that we have to work with, we have to increment, we have to use. No longer we have to use names and then I. That is not needed. Now we immediately get the value in this singular name here. No more names I, just the name. A bit simpler. Great. This is not so often used scenario, but I just want to point your attention to it. We can create a specific function we want to run on each iteration. So we can say const, and let's say log the name. That's going to be an arrow function, which is going to receive the same parameters, the name and the I, and then in there, we can use that console log. What we can do now is we can get rid of this whole function in here, and we can just say log the name. We're basically doing absolutely the same thing, but we extracted that function above. You can see if I only take the value of that function, I can bring it back in here, and that's the same thing. This syntax here is what you're going to see most often, so we're going to stick with that. One-liner arrow functions using array methods. Now, another important thing when it comes to for each is its return value. We want to know what is the return value of the for each method. Well, let's take a look. If I do const value is equal to names.foreach, what is that value going to be? As you can see, it is undefined. And it's not only because we have the console log here. Even if we try to return the name, it's still going to be undefined. For each method always, and I want to really point your attention to it, for each method always returns undefined values, which means you do something with the array, you console log something, and that's it. You can never get a return value out of a for each. For that reason, typically you never have a return value here. You just use the for each to either console log something or change something or sum something up or do something where you don't need that array back. You might be confused a bit, which is fully okay. That's why let's repeat everything and let's have some important remarks on the use of this method. How to use it, when not to use it. So we're gonna say here, use when. Use when you want to do something with each element of the array. And then don't use when you want to stop or break the loop when some condition is true. What does this mean? For example, you want to console log the elements of names array, but break the loop if the value of the current element is, for example, Jenny. To do that, you will have to use the basic for method. You cannot use for each if you want to break the loop of the array. And also, don't use when you're working with asynchronous code. We haven't yet talked about asynchronous code. We're going to talk about that at the end of the course, but the important part is that you cannot use any promises, thens, async await inside of the for each loop. For that, you have to use the normal for. So what could be some real use case scenario for the array for each? Let's say we simply want to sum some numbers up. Let sum is equal to 0. Then let's say that we have some numbers, an array of numbers. It's gonna be, let's do 65, 44, 12, and 4. Now you wanna call the for each method on the numbers array. Of course, we wanna pass it a callback function. Great. In there, you have a number, because we said this is gonna be numbers, my bad. So we're looping over the numbers array, and for each iteration, we get a different number. So first it's gonna be 65, 44, 12, and then 4. And what we wanna do is wanna increment the sum. So sum is plus equal to the number for each iteration. And then finally, we wanna console log the sum. As you can see, we get 125 without the need to use the normal for loop. This is quite simple, straightforward, and that's it. Later on, you'll see that we can also do this even more efficiently using the array reduce method for this particular example. That's it for the array for each, and in the next video we're going to talk about the array map. They behave extremely similarly, but map has a return value.